That's right. We are ready to puppy train.
Well, let's talk about the horror now. No matter how you want to shake it, ISIS is continuing the carnage and the ugliness. When you talk about 45 people being burned alive, you thought one Jordanian pilot was too much, so did we. What about 45 more that were caught and captured? We believe these 45 are among the Iraqi security forces, meant to intimidate, tell them to put down their arms. El-Baghdadi is the city now controlled maybe 95%. It's in ISIS's hands.
New reports this morning as well that ISIS has launched attacks near Erbil, actually through the night, apparently just wrapping that up at about 4 a.m. our time here.
You know, it's just too bad that these jihadis didn't have jobs, because then they wouldn't be setting people on fire and cutting off their heads. We played for you that extraordinary soundbite by Marie Harf, who is a spokesperson for the Secretary of State yesterday. Well, you know what she did yesterday as well? She went on TV and she doubled down. She said essentially the problem with these terrorists is they don't have jobs. But she explained George Bush said the same thing. Listen.
Look, it might be too nuanced an argument for some, like I've seen over the past 24 hours, some of the commentary out there, but it's really the smart way that Democrats, Republicans, military commanders, our partners in the Arab world think we need to combat. President George W. Bush talked about poverty being one of the drivers that leads people to extremism. Where there are lacking in these kinds of opportunities, we need to talk about how to make that different, how to help our partners around the world give young men in that vulnerable age group a different path in life.
But he also had a comprehensive way to fight against them. He also had a way to reform government. And at the same time, you can't say, hey, you know, if all these guys had perfect nuclear families, if everything was going great, and if they had a $75,000 a year job, that wouldn't help or hurt. That's one of the factors. But if you look at the leadership in the movement, it is totally without regard to your place in society or how much money is in your account.
That's right. President Bush actually went on to name the enemy specifically. That's just one point. Mark Thiessen, former chief speechwriter for George W. Bush, outlines the difference between President Bush and President Obama.
George W. Bush could say a similar thing, but he was going out there and actually leading the surge to defeat ISIS. And so when he said we also need to bring the hope of freedom, it wasn't seen as a dodge from actually doing the hard work of it. And he also called it radical Islam.
See, that's the key. So they're having this summit on extremism at the White House, but there's one thing they're leaving out. They're not mentioning that it's Islamic extremism. So they're trying to tiptoe around the very central motivation for groups like Al-Qaeda and also ISIS. So it's extraordinary that they're not doing it, and it does seem like Fox News is questioning. And it seems to be getting under the skin of the Attorney General of the United States, who was asked at the National Press Club yesterday, hey, why doesn't the administration call it what it is, Islamic extremism? Here's what he said.
We spend more time talking about what do you call it, as opposed to what do you do about it, you know? I mean, really, you know, if Fox didn't talk about this, they'd have nothing else to talk about, it would seem to me. You know, radical Islam, Islamic extremism, you know, I'm not sure an awful lot is gained by saying that. The terminology has, seems to me, little or no impact on what ultimately we have to do.
We speak to the best experts when it comes to military tactics. Many of them think that the strategies here are bankrupt when it comes to ISIS, mainly because the verbiage here when it refers to ISIS and what's going on. When you see 45 burned alive, 21 beheaded, a Jordanian pilot burned alive just within a matter of weeks here. Why won't the administration call it what it is? We should be taking it seriously. Reverend Franklin Graham agrees. He said this is about a holy war.
This is something that the White House doesn't understand. This is a religious aspect to this that they just don't accept, and they refuse, even to this day, will not accept it and don't believe it. We have to understand who we're dealing with, and you have to deal with it accordingly. And the president is ignoring the fact that these are Islamic extremists, these are terrorists, and ISIS is a terrorist organization, and they are bent on destroying the West.
See, for one thing, the Attorney General should flip around a little bit. Evidently, he only watches Fox, because if you look at the other channels, they're bringing up the same thing. If you go to international channels, they bring up the same issue. They're wondering the same thing at the BBC and around the world, why we're calling it something different. And he, as a chief law enforcement officer, should know, you don't just say why jail is full. You say, why are the jails full? What landed them in prison? And what were they thinking before they got there? And as you unfold that coil, you realize at the base of what they're doing is they are claiming it is religion. So it's not condemning the religion. It's saying, hey, why are they killing people in such a brutal fashion? What's motivating them? Why wouldn't he know that?
The crazy thing
or maybe he does and doesn't want to call it that, because if you just refer to it as street violence or non-integration of those who come here, then perhaps you don't have to deal with it in a big way if you don't name it as such.
We would like to hear from you. Do you think it's important that they actually address the issue by calling it what it is? You can Facebook us, you can email us, or you can tweet us on this Wednesday morning.
All right. Meanwhile, the immigration showdown is heating up in Washington in a huge way.
President Obama's immigration overhaul was set to begin today, but now it's stopped in its tracks by a federal judge down in Texas. The president vows to appeal.
Kevin Cork is live in Washington with the very latest on this. Good morning to you, Kevin.
Good morning, guys. You know, in a lot of circles, Judge Andrew Hannon is the man of the hour for standing up for the rule of law and blocking the president. But if you think of this sort of in football terms, this is really just like the first quarter of a very